Okay, just Christine will do the sentiment for us this morning.
Thanks, members. And again, just a reminder that this morning's proceedings will be recorded. So we have Councillor Douglas Reid.
Yeah.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yep.
Councillor John McGee. Councillor Tom Cook.
Yes.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Yeah.
Councillor Fiona Campbell.
Here, thanks.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor Claire Leach.
Yes.
Councillor Neil McGee.
Hello, Lynn. I was locked out there. I'm just getting back in. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McGee. Councillor Jim Roberts.
Here, Christine.
Councillor Jackie Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Christine.
Do we have Shaheen Mirza? Nope. Babs Mowat.
Yes, here.
Reverend Dr Alan Vint.
Yes, here, thanks.
Ian Pettigrew. Can see you, Ian. And Jackie Livingston.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christine. I don't think any apologies. I think there's a full turnout this morning. Was it?
Yeah.
It's good. Okay, well, straight into item. On the first item, any declaration of interest? Are there any? Major that we know of. Okay, straight on to item 2, and that's a review of measures to align housing developments with the school estate capacity. Andrew will introduce the paper.
Thanks, Chair. This paper, first off, is I suppose a combined effort. So we have the Head of Education, Head of Economic Development, and also Aileen Hollywood, who's been heavily involved in the development of the project with me at this morning's Cabinet, who will, I'm sure, be able to answer any other questions that I'll not be able to cover. So just in summary of the paper, Chair, the report is just a review of the measures, as noted, to align housing developments with the school estate capacity. It provides an overview of how information is collated, analysed and used. There's a snapshot within the report and some examples of the schools that were noted with high occupancy in the school, in the school estate management plan. And it identifies some of the existing actions, some future considerations, and some of the longer term implications in relation to housing developments and the school estate. The background just identifies and notes that this report is on the back of discussions that we previously had at Cabinet in March of this year, where a report was asked to be brought back to Cabinet. It also kind of referenced just a wee bit more information around some of the wider work that's been happening nationally. We have benchmarked with other authorities, and the heads of planning had actually produced a report just around the same time as the ask came from Cabinet to look at this issue. That report covered a number of the areas that we had already identified to look at, and it also benchmarked across a whole range of authorities across Scotland in terms of how this issue was being approached. So that has absolutely informed the approach and the information that's included within the report. The next section in the report just covers the current arrangements that we have to manage capacities within the school estate. Clearly, we report on an annual basis through the school estate management plan, and that includes, as well as obviously condition and suitability, capacities within all our schools. And that report kind of is very much focused on identifying those schools where if capacity is an issue, whether it's under occupancy or we're getting close to maximum occupancy, and looks to identify a number of areas to address that. The following section after that looks at actually how we undertake the school role projections And this is very much led through education, through their education support service that's been strengthened over the last couple of years, just in terms of the resource, the statistical analysis, and the connections that team has with a whole range of partners, utilising information from NHS, from planning, and obviously the education information that we have across the school estate in every school. It does set a clear methodology, and again, benchmarking that across other authorities. We believe that we have a really strong process in place. There's a range of key factors. I've highlighted a couple of them, but these are outlined in paragraphs 12 to 19. And I think that really just highlights the comprehensive nature of this information and the work that's put in to develop these figures on an annual basis. The next section obviously highlights one of the other kind of key areas, which is obviously an area that probably is a wee bit less within our control and obviously can change things quite significantly on an annual basis, which is obviously placing requests. Because clearly when we look at catchment housing, then it would be within the area linked to the school. Placing requests then gives that opportunity for families to move about within those areas, which obviously kind of changes the dynamic in terms of those numbers. Paragraph 22 to 35 outlines, as I said, a snapshot extracted from the appendix information. Clearly the appendix information goes into significant detail around housing developments and also individual schools with projections over the next 5 years and also the historic position. Appendix 4 has been updated yesterday, just with a more up-to-date report, which we would include within the next school estate management plan. And that obviously just gives members an indication of which schools are already near capacity and where we have under occupancy across the estate. Sections 22 to 35 highlights a number of examples. Effectively, what we've done is obviously within this report is try to draw out and target the areas that we know are the ones where the greatest pressure is. But I think what it does also demonstrate is the variability and how the range of other factors have impacted on individual school roles. So where you've got examples where you can see the housing development numbers have translated into an increase in the school role, whereas in other schools, the increase in housing development hasn't had an impact on the school role because other factors have balanced that out. The next section from paragraph 36 just identifies a range of existing measures to address increasing capacity. As I've said, I mean, we've been reporting the school estate management plan on an annual basis for the last 10 years, and a number of actions have been taken to address any kind of pressures around increasing capacity. We have targeted an 85% occupancy rate across our school estate, and at the moment we're sitting about 75%. So there still is significant capacity available across the overall school estate, but clearly what we've highlighted in the report is the pressure points across our communities. And that's very much what we've continued to do through the school estate management plan, is look at where occupancy is over 90% and look to put in additional measures. As I've said, sort of through paragraph 36 to 49, it provides some further details around those actions already identified to support schools where occupancy pressures are seen or projected. This includes temporary internal reconfigurations, modular classrooms and extensions, capping of the intake, as well as significant capital investment in new facilities. From paragraph 50, we then look to identify a number of future considerations. And again, I think just reflecting the information that we've previously presented to Cabinet around the Learning Estate Investment Programme. We've obviously been successful in bids around Doon Campus and St Sophia's, and clearly we've identified northwest areas of Kilmarnock and also Stewarton as the next areas where we would look to kind of put bids in for future schools development, and that very much aligns to the requirements of the increasing housing within those areas. think that also links to the local development plan too, which is currently in development, and we're anticipating that that report will come back to Cabinet before Christmas. Again, what that will do is identify where the next phase of housing developments are across East Ayrshire, and again, we would look to incorporate some of those pressures and some of that consideration in terms of the next phase of our school estate development. I think one specific area in the development of that is mentioned in the report is that opportunity to maximise developer contributions, which is something that, because we have had in the past significant under-occupancy across our estate, is something we've not been able to maximise. But again, I think there's been good discussions through education, planning and facilities and property management to maximise that opportunity as it comes within the next local development plan. I would note that and this is something that's not necessarily included in the report at the moment, but I would note that there are other pressures that we know are coming across the school estate and kind of prioritising our investment. A number of those around, including the expansion of school food, where we are looking to increase the uptake of school food, obviously, and all children in primary school from next year will have access to free school meals within primary schools. Again, that will have an impact on how we use the spaces within the school estate. Outdoor learning is an area where we'll continually look to develop and again gives us some opportunities to address internal pressures within schools, and clearly in the longer term climate change and how that impacts on the development and investment within our buildings. So there's a range of additional points that are not included in this report as well that we are taking into account in terms of our considerations. So in summary, I think as noted in the report, I think we are absolutely seeing a positive growth in terms of our housing developments within East Ayrshire. Clearly, they are targeted in certain areas of the authority. The School Estate Management Plan has focused investment on extensions, but also recognising that we are looking at an overall efficiency improvement across our school estate. In general, that overcapacity, if we can target it around individual catchment areas, that gives us a greater opportunity to maximise developer contributions. But clearly we are looking to continue to address any current pressures that we've got, and obviously a number of those are highlighted within the report. So, members, I would hope that the report gives further reassurance in terms of the calculations and the approach that we're taking, that we will provide further information, obviously, as the local development plan 2 is completed, and then we'll have a further update in terms of the school estate management plan. So I appreciate there will be, I'm sure there'll be a number of questions, but obviously in terms of the recommendations, clearly we're looking to continue the good practice in terms of collating the statistical information and noting that for members, building on the good joined up approach that we have between education, planning and facilities and property management. Look to progress some of those short-term measures, including the modular unit that was noted prior to recess in terms of increasing that short-term capacity at the Grange campus. And then the 3 further recommendations, or 4 further recommendations for that kind of future planning around the bids for the Learning Estate Investment Plan, looking to recognise what does come out of Local Development Plan 2, particularly around the expansion of the Grange campus potentially, and then looking to just continue to provide this level of information to members at future school estate management plans, and obviously take forward any considerations that come from that information. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Andrew. A very good report. I think created quite a bit of interest, I know. Can I maybe kick off just with more than local interest, just first of all in terms of the Grange campus, and in particular Annan Hill. I have been to parent councils there, and I know this is kind of concern, as a concern to us all and we've discussed these issues before. I think in terms of successfully agreed to have introduced capping at Annan Hill, and that is having an impact, but that impact is going to be slow. I think before we can, it'll be 2 years before we reduce one class in terms of just the way the classes are structured at the moment. And thankfully, we've seen a reduction in the amount of placing requests. I'm told anecdotally from Hillhead, there's a lot more stability, and we can see, I think that's shown in the papers that you've provided today, that there's a lot more people just staying within the Hillhead area. There seems to be good work there, and I think some of that's to be welcomed. However, there still continues to be significant pressure. You know, we're sitting with 2 live planning applications, detailed planning applications for some of the region, about 600 houses sitting in that area that will be on the catchment area for Annan Hill, and that's notwithstanding the pressures that we're going to get for the LDB2. Either way, whatever way this cuts, it's going to be pressure on the Grange campus itself, which is a worry. And I think we've just got to keep that, keep that in my thoughts so that we're able to respond to that. Because the last thing we want to do is reduce the growth of our community and our economy as well, and by reducing the amount of houses that we need and the correct in the areas that we want. So it's really important that we have the school provision that meets that demand as well. So just a couple of wee kind of questions. I mean, we know, and we're going to be reviewing that, and there'll be discussions about we're going to discuss the LDP2. But one of the things that are concerning parents as well as the parents' organisations, particularly in Annan Hill, is some of the pressure from not just the classroom areas, but the other non-teaching areas. You've got the street and Grange campus, which is supposed to accommodate, I think, 300. Where kids do their dining and all the rest. And I understand just now, even because of COVID, they're under pressure just now, and they're eating in the classrooms and stuff like that. And I know some of that's related to COVID, but I think, nevertheless, notwithstanding that, there's still pressure on these areas. And that, as Andrew said, other pressures. And it's a good pressure that we're going to get free meals for 47s, but that's just going to increase the demand for school meals. And it's important that we're able to cope with that. Also, I understand in terms of staff resources, I understand that some of this is related to COVID as well, but I'm told by the Parent Council that some staff are eating their lunches in their cars, and that's not satisfactory. But I know some of that's related to COVID as well. But I think as we come out of that, we've got to make sure we've got adequate staff resources as well, and play resource. I'm frequently reminded by people close to me that there's a shortfall in play resource, and I know that's backed up with some of the teachers as well. And I think that's something we've got to be minded of. Finally, and there's the ASN review is coming up, and that, I think that because the Park School is within the campus, that'll be important. But I do know, and I've been told that Annan Hill takes more than its fair share of people that require, with other needs, and that's why there's been a lot of placing requests because of some of the work they're doing with dyslexia, and there's children there with some challenging behaviours and other things that are. I think there's a significant disproportion of people with these demands that the school are dealing with just now. That's a kind of concern to them. And just my question specifically on the additional support needs, first of all, to Linda. When we're going to get that review, and what kind of assurance will we be able to take from that review, first of all? So can I maybe take that from Linda, and maybe Andrew, if you maybe could comment on some of the other pressures again, and then I'll apologise to other members, but I'll open up the floor from other folk as well after those two questions. First of all, Linda.
Thanks, Leader, and through you, Chair. So, Councillor Reid, I think clearly the report today is centred around capacity in terms of forecasting and indeed collaborative working. in terms of the ask of Cabinet made of us in March, which was clearly to come back with further detail as to forecasting in terms of how sure can we be that we have an accurate forecasting model both in place and indeed in play. And I think Andrew's clearly recounted a very strong collaboration in that area, and through both the SEMP and indeed that which you've been presented with today, clearly outlined the areas in which we already know that we have issues, and clearly Grange and Annan Hill and clearly Park as part of Grange campus are at play in there, and clearly the other one that jumps out of the report is Laneshaw. So just to pop through a couple of the issues raised, and I would say, Chair, some of the issues that have been raised are indeed anecdotal, and I have actually put extra staff in Annan Hill that clearly have not been reported to you via the Parent Council at any recent meetings. So actually, in respect of leadership in Annan Hill and Grange, where there's been an ask of extra staffing or extra resource, that provision has actually been made. Clearly, I can't comment, Councillor Reid, in regards to young people with ASN opting to go to Annan Hill. It's not a phenomenon that we tend to see. Like every school, there are young people who, give us challenges, who, clearly have been through trauma and indeed present on occasion as being dysregulated. But there's no statistical data to suggest that these young people and their families are making a beeline for Annan Hill. And indeed, as you rightly recognise, the situation at Hill Head has also stabilised. So in terms of Annan Hill and Grange and Park going forward, and to also answer your question on specialist transformation, where I would go with that, it's actually going to be a combined effect. So clearly, I'm incredibly grateful to Cabinet for already passing the cap on Annan Hill, and I've been to Parent Council on several occasions to discuss that with them, and that has to be the way we go in terms of making that gradual reduction in roll. Further to that is the addition of the modular classrooms that we've put or are putting on the Grange campus at this point in time. And then, as you correctly point out, Chair, the specialist transformation, which is looking at Park School and the young people who are taken there every day out of their own communities, where actually clearly with a place-based approach and a huge priority for this council, the anticipation is that we will be able to educate an awful lot more of those young people who make their way to Park School back in their own localities with their own friends, and indeed in their own schools. And I would advise that the work on the specialist transformation paper has indeed already begun, if you like, or recommenced. So I think in combination of all, certainly, as you know, Councillor Reid, I invite my staff every week, every Friday, to contact me directly if there are any issues at all. And clearly, aspects like staff eating in cars, etc., I would absolutely concur are not acceptable, but nor is that an expectation of the service that that's the conditions under which they would serve. So I would absolutely take the point that there is pressure on the communal areas for young people, and the eating in classrooms is a COVID mitigation in respect of that. And again, we've got great combination with our collaboration with our colleagues in FPM in terms of the provision of meals in a safe way during a period of time in which we are still seeing a significant number of cases. So really, I think it's about, the nub of the issue is very much along the lines of the capacity issues that we have. I'm certainly able and happy to pick up anything that is of a more anecdotal nature at any stage with, either yourself, Councillor Reid, or any other colleagues that want to raise any such issues. But in terms of a combination of efforts, I think we've got everything in place to see a good reduction in roll at the Grange campus that I would say will be enacted within this academic year and not next. We should see the drop down, as we're already seeing with Hill Head. We're already seeing an impact on roll.
Thanks very much, Linda. I think that's particularly helpful. And I mean, I think I didn't obviously mention that we're offering some solutions in the short term here in terms of the modular buildings, etc. But I think we've got to kind of at the same time cast the net wider and just look at, make sure that we're prepared for any further pressures that we have and able to respond to that. Now, Fiona Campbell, I've got a list of 7 people here that want to speak. Fiona first.
Right, you'll all be glad to hear that I don't really have any questions. I've just got three kind of general comments. First of all, I'm pleased and I'm reassured to hear that the methodology being used to project school roles is providing a good degree of accuracy. So we're told anyway, and I think that's obviously needed. So I'm pleased about that. Secondly, I really do welcome the more collaborative approach between education, planning and facilities and property management. I think that's absolutely essential and key to going forward on these issues. Finally, I also think it's a good idea that the data and impact of new housing developments is updated annually and reported to Cabinet along with the school estate management plan. I think that's a really good idea. There was one thing in the report, I think I read this, somewhere that national guidance is that infrastructure should not be a barrier to house building. Maybe this is a question, I don't know, but I find that a bit concerning, a bit alarming, that we don't take account of infrastructure when we're doing house building. And I do appreciate how important building new houses is. So maybe somebody could actually comment on that for me, please. So my three comments I've now just added a question on, I think. Apologies.
It's all right, Fiona, you got it there, and I think the question, David can answer that in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Campbell, that as we review the local development plan, we do consider the infrastructure issues, and that is part of the LDP2 process. With a number of communities, there's obviously there can be certain constraints in infrastructure, and it's important that we have an understanding of what those are and if there's any suitable mitigation. In terms of some of the discussions that were had regarding Annenhill and the Grange, obviously as we look forward with the LDP2, we have to consider what the infrastructure impacts are on obviously the schools and where there's a need for further schools, what the impacts in the road network are. So all of these matters, including sewerage, and all the utilities are considered as part of the overall impact. And there are a number of examples, particularly Sturton, where we have in LDP2 where we've got a number of significant constraints, everything from transportation right through to the NHS and medical facilities. So all of these matters are part of the overall review, and as we move forward with LDP2, we have to consider those and put those into play and have suitable mitigation. And indeed, with the future LDP2, we are looking at developer contributions to consider how we deal with some of those infrastructure issues. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, Fiona, we'll then go on to John McGee. John.
Thanks, Dougie. I welcome the paper, and I think this is exactly what we've asked for. Are we accurate in what we're predicting? The number of kids that are going to our schools? And again, it's not an exact science, but I think the paper highlights lots of issues for us. And thank you to Andrew Kennedy for giving me a run through the paper earlier in the week. But I've got some real concerns regarding the house building that we're doing, and we're not wanting to curtail house building, but we can't keep going on building houses in areas where there's clear constraints on the schools. Annenhill and Grange, just one example. Laneshaw Primary, I mean, when the new head teacher went in there, I mean, that was a pretty shabby wee primary school. And he's made sure there was a lot of internal work done in there. And again, we've had a new build at Laneshaw again for the early years, which was very welcome. But we've continued to build houses all around about that school, and yet we've no, again, what we're talking about is modular accommodation, and we're saying that for the Grange. Again, modular accommodation is a modern word for a porta cabin, and there probably are vastly superior to porta cabins of yesteryear. But surely that can't be what we're looking for our school kids. I mean, East Ayrshire, over the years, a great number of years, has built some first-class schools, but surely modular accommodation can't be the answer. I'd also like to ask, what's a kind of example of maximising developer contributions? What does that mean? And could you give us an example so that councillors can fully understand what maximising developer contributions would mean? Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm looking between Andrew and David. Andrew?
I suppose two parts to that question. I mean, I think kind of as David and Linda and the report kind of suggests, the infrastructure in the schools shouldn't be a constraint in terms of housing development. But what we should be looking to do, and what we have been kind of discussing, is that opportunity to ensure that the two things move at the same pace. And I think that's probably in the past where we've not necessarily had that kind of opportunity as closely aligned as I think we are now moving towards. So I think kind of the temporary, the modular, the porta cabins, whatever you want to kind of class it as, is certainly what I would class as that kind of immediate response. There are projections where it looks like some things might go up and then come back down, so we wouldn't necessarily invest fully in new facilities. But I think, as we've highlighted in the report, in terms of our future bids for the Learning Estate Investment Programme, then the Laneshaw Primary School and the sort of northwest of Kilmarnock area was the areas where that we'd identified that need. Clearly, the report is also highlighting that from the Grange campus and the academy side, those are the areas that we would be looking for that additional capital investment, where we would then be able to kind of address a long-term need in terms of the capacities and the standards of the facilities we would want to put in to address that. The challenge that we've always got here is that in terms of development plans, in terms of planning applications, although a planning application may come in and be approved, it may be a significant number of years before that actually turns into housing. And we have seen that in the northwest of Kilmarnock, where there are still sites that are not developed that were approved over 20 years ago. So what we're having to do is try and balance both those issues. The issue around the developer contributions, and I mean, I'll let David come in maybe around the specific question. But the challenge we've had in the past is that there is capacity over the school estate, which has resulted in, as a developer comes in, we've not then been able to link that development directly to a school that was at capacity, which then would allow us to link it to a developer contribution. That's where I think now, because we are seeing the pressure within certain catchment areas, that will allow us to make a much more direct connection between, if you're going to build an extra 10 houses or an extra 100 houses, then that means we need to build an extra classroom. Therefore, we can make that direct connection in terms of how that would then be required as part of that housing development. And that's where that's not been in the past, which has meant we are responding to housing development rather than aligning our schools development with the housing developments. And I think that's what hopefully this report gives you a bit more reassurance that moving forward we are in a much better place.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to supplement Andrew's comments, I think one of the things I would add is that when we're looking at developer contributions, that they will be different for different locations, because it may be that if a community that it's identified where if there's an expansion of house in a specific community that it needs an extension, whereas in some cases it might need a new school, depending on that size of development. So it is about looking at the contribution and make sure that that aligns with the actual education need. The other thing was mentioned there was about land banking. It is a difficult situation to manage, because landowners in the local development plan, they get there's an area designated when it goes through the LDP process to develop. And as an example, with a number of sites that Councillor Reid had alluded to that have been in the local development plan for a number of years and are only now starting to come to the fore. So those were already taken account of as part of the LDP process, but obviously households change and the numbers of children change per household and per area. So it is quite a challenge for Andrew and his team to pinpoint just exactly. But the overall process for looking at developer contributions is to try and get an appropriate sum per house that will make a contribution to the overall infrastructure for the school estate.
Okay. Okay, I've got Jim Roberts. Jim?
Thanks very much, Chair. First of all, I would agree with the recommendations of the report, and obviously there has been a lot of work and detail put into this report. I think when you look at some of the statistical information in here, you can see where the pinch points are. You see where the areas of growth are as well. These were also discussed at the local development, the member officer working group for the local development Q plan. But can I come back to the formula that's used? I mean, that stimulated quite an interesting debate at the LDP2. And to me, it seems to be a bit of a black art in terms of the calculation. Because again, when you look back at the statistical information, you can see where the pinch points are. And in terms of predictability, we maybe need to do it better, because there, in the recommendations of the report, we're looking to spend 600k funded from capital contingency. And I think, Dougie, you highlighted the P4 to P7, the demands on the service and any infrastructure capital that's needed for the likes of that. But that formula, while it may appear to work in the majority of cases, I think there's got to be a better hook-up between planning and education in terms of the predictability. Because if we don't get the predictability right, and again, I would recognise that it's not an exact science, then we find ourselves in a place where we're putting contingencies in place in a relatively short space of time to cater for educational pinch points. So I think we maybe need to look at the calculation where there are areas of significant growth, and Stuart has been highlighted as one, but there are other areas as well. But I think that's what we need to keep an eye on. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. No, I'd agree with you. I think that's. I think it's getting better. It's getting more accurate, the predictions, but I think we're arguing for as much accuracy as we can get, and the two are aligned. I think that's a point well made. Tom Cook.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for the report, Andrew, and for your time yesterday talking through some of the aspects of it. Just a couple of 2 or 3 points maybe to make. One is just around the land allocation, the LDP2. It's my understanding, maybe clarified, that whilst we can decide on the number of houses that we need, there is a possibility Scottish Government can come back and actually increase that, which would add additional pressure to us. I'm sure David can answer that one at the end. Just in relation to the modular accommodation at Annan Hill, I know it was disappointed by, or the Parent Council were disappointed to hear that we're only getting 2 additional classrooms. I believe there's 5 classes at present of primary children working within the Grange building itself, and they had hoped that all of these would be able to move back into different accommodation. But I think the issue really around that is more of a management issue, that the Grange pupils are out at interval when Annan Hill pupils are still working in these classrooms, and they're standing outside the windows, making noise and carrying on outside the windows, which is distracting the primary children. I think that's maybe something that Linda could address through some management action at the school to try and address that and take that issue away. Because I think we realise that 5 additional classrooms is probably not what's needed there as we work through the process of reducing the capacity or reducing the intake of the school through the capping. So I think there's an issue around that one. And Obviously the point that was addressed, I think, by Leader as well, is despite any action we take at Annan Hill to reduce the role there, when it comes to Grange campus, all the feeder schools for Grange Academy are all getting pretty close to their limit. So I think there's going to be pressure on Grange Academy itself as a secondary school as we move forward. And I think there is some suggestion in the paper that that needs to really be looked at to make sure that the Grange secondary school is suitable for the future needs of where we're going, of the people. And just a final point, and maybe again from Linda, you did say that the report on the ASN is being prepared. I'm just wondering if we have a date, a timescale for when that's likely to be presented to Cabinet so that we can see where we're going. So I think that will make could make a big impact on the capacity of the campus itself. So these are the few points. But so welcome the paper and look forward to seeing this work proceeding fairly quickly at Annan Hill.
Thanks, Tom. Linda?
Yeah, Chair, through you, Councillor Cook, thank you very much for your comments on that. And indeed your understanding of the two sections of modular accommodation to try and mitigate against some of the issues there. And I can appreciate the Parent Council's view on that, but clearly the two are in place to allow us to put the other measures in place such that we can get Grange back on track. In respect of noise, etc., Councillor Cook, that's very much a local issue for the school, and you know I'm quite surprised the Parent Council haven't taken that to the respective head teachers. We've got many models of campus across the authority, and indeed I reflect back on my time as a head teacher when we brought Hurlford Primary into stay, and with several models where primary schools clearly coexist wonderfully with their secondaries, their ECCs, and indeed in Grange's case with Park School as well. So it really is up to the head teachers at that local level to manage those issues in the way that, you know, clearly we would expect on all of our campuses. In respect of the special transformation paper, just to catch the last question, Councillor Cook, it is underway. I don't have a firm timescale, but I will come back to Cabinet to give you a better update on that. Clearly, you've had the preliminary paper. We are hoping to change a slight direction in that, but clearly the premise of it remains the same in terms of more young people being educated in their communities. So I'll absolutely commit to come back with a date, Councillor Cook, once I consult further with the team that I've got working with me on that.
Thanks for that, Linda. I think that'd be helpful. It's really good. David, did you want to come back in? Sorry.
Yeah, just to answer Councillor Cook's question just about the land allocation. I think obviously colleagues that have discussed with the Members Officers Working Group just the extent of the process that we have to go through in terms of house and land requirements and allocation for the local development plan. So what we have to identify is, you know, housing needs over the next 10 years. We have to state that. We will do a monitoring report once that's agreed under LDP2, but these figures have to be agreed by the Scottish Government. So we went through that process in conjunction with the Head of Housing and Communities, and we've came to a figure which has been accepted for East Ayrshire over the next 10 years, which is a figure circa about 4,000 houses. Now that sounds a lot of houses over 10 years. That's for the whole East Ayrshire, not just for one location. But what it does do is it identifies growth areas as well within that, and it takes on board the work that's proposed in terms of land allocation for private developments and for public, including RSLs in the SHIP. And in addition, it's important that we then factor that in and monitor that against the LDP once it's approved. So that gives Councillor Cook a kind of an overview of what the overall figures are, and that has been accepted. Also, as last part to say is, if you benchmark that against what we've delivered in the last 10 years, on average it's about the same. So.
Thanks, David. Okay,
Thank
Tom.
you. Yeah, no, thanks for that. And, thanks, Linda, as well.
Okay, the two Jackies, Jackie Livingston first.
Hello, it's really just a comment to make on the paper. A long time ago when they put the Grange together, I can remember saying the Grange wasn't big enough and lessons had to be learned. And same with Stewarton. I used to live in Stewarton in a new build, and there's 31 children in one street. Okay, 5 are mine, but there's 26 below the age of 2. And now we're seeing the impact on Laneshaw and Stewarton Academy. Hopefully from the paper and the better working between planning and our partners in education, we will see that we'll not have to go through this again in the future if they get the numbers right. And we've learned all our lessons. So I just wanted to congratulate everybody. It's unfortunate that we've got problems with the Grange, but with the measures getting put in place and in Stewarton, hopefully in the future going forward, we'll learn from this and won't have it again. So well done to everybody. And it's been a long journey, but we've learned a lot of lessons, and everyone has worked extremely hard to get there. And more importantly, parents have been listened to when we've said over the years, we need more accommodation, need more space, take into account that in these new houses there are more children, and the numbers have increased. We see it now, it's 0.3 as opposed to before it's like 0.1. So well done to everybody.
Thanks, Jackie. I think that there's a clear message here of a closer collaboration between education and planning, and that's and population planning. I think that's really important. Other Jackie Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, I just wanted to say that the paper clearly shows how complex and multifaceted that this subject is clearly no straightforward, and it highlights the fact that collaboration and a collaborative approach is essential for us to go forward if we're going to do some of the other concerns that's been raised about trying to predict accuracy. I know this has been asked already, and I don't want to stray too far away from it, but there's other pressures coming, like the rollout or the food for primary kids, and I'm wondering, are we already looking and are we predicting what kind of impact we think this is going to have on already existing pressures within schools? Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Andrew, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, specifically on the expansion of school food and primary 4 to 7, obviously the Scottish Government have got a number of themes around that food expansion, and there's ongoing discussions at the moment. We've been asked to submit kind of projections and costings at the moment over the next couple of months to look to address what our requirements would be across the whole estate. So we have been looking at that at the moment, and over the last couple of months, just to kind of identify exactly what those additional asks will be. Clearly there's a significant revenue investment, but there clearly will also be a capital investment required to meet those demands in future, and we're already in discussions with the government on that.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Neil?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry for the delay. Just a quick one, Chair, for Andrew. You mentioned, Andrew, at the start, there's an update on Appendix 4. I was just looking for some reassurance that the Barney campus is no under any pressures, because the figures are obviously dated for the 2 academies that used to be there. So can you clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. The appendix, obviously, that was circulated was from the previous school estate management plan, which is obviously retrospective. A further update was issued. I mean, clearly, across our secondary school estate, we have moved significantly in terms of improving the utilisation of the space. So there's no doubt previous facilities had significant underutilisation. So we have moved to a much more efficient model. But clearly there is a level of capacity within that. But as we see future housing developments and going, obviously, the life of these schools, then we will have to kind of review things further going forward. But clearly at the moment, kind of the plan has been to make our schools more efficient in terms of the space utilisation. So the occupancy levels are much higher, but clearly they're within, or they do take into account some of the future developments that we know of within that area for Barony as well.
Thanks,
Just to thank Andrew, and I was taking into account the potential housing pressures nearby, and that's a helpful answer. Thank you.
Chief Executive Eddie.
Thanks, Leader. I mean, I think, members are reflecting how complex this is. And, I suppose I need to put in another bit of complexity, around some of that. When we look at the National Records of Scotland about population projections for East Ayrshire up to 2028, it shows a reduction of 7.5% in the number of our young people between 0 to 15 and a reduction of 4.1% in our 16 to 24-year-olds. So you can actually see that overall in the whole of East Ayrshire, there is a reduction in the number of our young people. The issues for it are, what do we do about the quality aspects in terms of the teaching estate? So that's one of the things we'd want to look at. And what do we also do when there's under-occupancy? So this is about a shift in demography around East Ayrshire to an extent that we need to manage. And some of our issues in terms of reductions in school estate are going to be just as challenging for us as some of the areas that there is, the increase. So we have focused, and rightly because of the pressures, on the some of the areas where there's an increase, but we'll equally, as we go forward over the next number of years, given that shift in demography, need to think what we're doing in terms of areas where there's a reduction in terms of the number of children attending some of our schools. So just reflecting, and you have heard it already for a number of the different officers, and reflecting with the members' comments, the complexity of the work that we're trying to carry out here.
Okay, Jim McMahon, last but not least.
Thank you, Chair. And just picking up on straight away what Eddie says there, I hope the predictions are wrong, Eddie, and I hope we continue to grow in East Ayrshire. I'd like to ken the formulas they use for their predictions as well as around the demographics. But the point I was going to make was something that Councillor McGee had picked up on, and it was from the updated appendix that we had. And it was around those statistics at what was Auchinleck and Cumnock Academies and the merger into the Barony campus. So for I take it the figures prior to the Barony campus were the most recent ones we had, which was a combination of 609 capacity and an increase of 41 pupils when they started at Barony. Right, so that's 652 for our current role. So I see we have 72 places, but it's that time scale that can serve, and I apologise for the late one in this because it's just an update. For that original jump, we see 41 pupils for the moving for Cumnock Auchinleck to the Barony, and we only have surplus places of 72. So maybe some kind of reasoning or explanation around about how we had the jumping figures and the expectation as we go forward, taking into consideration how we're looking at the planning for the Ward 7, Ward 8 areas when we take it, what plans for the Belfield interchange, and have a look at that, the core project and the Ayrshire growth deal, and possibly the expansion up that way as well, coming off the back of that.
I think that's somebody to keep an eye on. Yeah, Andrew?
What I was going to do is maybe just make one slight point, but I think Aileen was looking to come in, and I think she'll be able to provide a bit more detail. Councillor McMahon, one of the issues that we've got in secondary schools, when you look at the appendix, you'll see the working capacity figure of 2,466 against a usable spaces of 1,700. And it's obviously the usable spaces that we work that capacity on. Within secondary schools, the way we calculate the usable space is partly down to timetabling and efficiency, as well as just the way that calculation is using. So technically, we could put 2,500 children into that building if every space was used to its maximum. So the issues around secondary schools become much more about timetabling subject choices than it does around the physical space. So there are other ways that we can manage secondary school occupancy rather than just kind of obviously creating the additional space, and that's one of the key things in terms of going forward. But maybe if I could maybe just let Aileen come in, kind of final point, just to give a wee bit of detail around some of that, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor McMahon. I think I was kind of going to reflect a wee bit on what Andrew was saying there, just about, that the usable spaces is to allow us to manage the curriculum, because if we didn't have that flexibility, then we would basically be determining the curriculum that the young people would be following, because we would be telling them these are the subjects where we've got the spaces. But I think the other thing in terms of the 72 places is, and just what to bear in mind as well, is that within the Barony campus we have got significant numbers of flexible areas that are available for learning and teaching as well. So this is just actually about the number of seats, if you like, that are in classrooms, and it doesn't take into account, you know, the STEM plaza, the, you know, the area, the other flexible areas. So there is quite a wee bit of additional space available. But the other thing I know that Andrew referenced at the beginning of the report, the Head of Planning's report, and one of the interesting things within that was, just as Andrew was mentioning, about how we calculate usable spaces. So it's this arbitrary figure, which is, you know, you take the number of actual seats within the building, multiply it by 0.75, and you take away 150. It's this arbitrary Strathclyde formula that's been in place for a long, long time. But actually what was highlighted in the Head of Planning's report was quite a number of other local authorities have moved away from that. So we're actually using a very, very generous calculation, and some of them are reducing that as well to reflect the fact that we have these flexible spaces within our new campuses. So it was just to give you that wee bit of background. I hope that provides you a wee bit of reassurance that whilst you look at what looks like 72 spaces, there is room for an awful lot more of learning and teaching going on within the campus. Okay,
thanks. Jim, you want back in, Jim?
Yeah. Just to say thanks for that explanation, and I'll be a bit more reassured about it now. Right, thank you.
Okay, I think we're, you know, it's a really good discussion there. There's a lot there to take in, and I think there's other issues that we did, you know, in terms of, you know, with the new campus at Doon. There's also issues there, but that'll be for another day. But for a healthy discussion here today. Just, I was wondering, just maybe we can get some advice from officers, but I think just to kind of strengthen the recommendations, recommendation 5, we're saying we agree to a further review to be undertaken to future accommodation requirements within the Grange campus following the approval of LDB2. I wonder if we could maybe, we've spoken about the ASN review and other pressures, and I wonder if we could incorporate that within the recommendation, i.e. to take cognizance the ASN review and, you know, any further pressures that's required for the dining and other social areas. Just kind of tidies it up in response to what's in the content in the paper. Eddie?
Through you, Chair, I'm sure we can say that we'll take into full account any wider aspects, including, you know, ASN review and other, you know, local and national developments, you know, a form of words like that. So we do that, and indeed that's the type of work we would do, not just for Grange campus. To be honest, we would do it for all the, you know, like campus.
Thanks. It's just for completeness, if that's okay, members. Okay, with that, can we agree recommendations? Okay, thanks very much. On to item 3, and that's additional grant allocation to support implementation and delivery of the Young Persons Guarantee in East Ayrshire. Ian, where are you?
I'm here, Chair.
Hi.
Thanks, Chair. This paper seeks to update Cabinet and project proposals in response to the recent additional allocation of grant funding from Scottish Government to support the implementation of the Young Person Guarantee in East Ayrshire. The recommendations to Cabinet are that Cabinet approve the expansion of activities and resources to support delivery of the Young Person Guarantee, approve additional temporary staffing and the establishment of a bank register for suitably experienced employability practitioners, approve the development of a trusted partner framework and delivery through the procurement of projects based on a Sector Skills Academy model, and approve the establishment of an employer apprenticeship grant scheme to support new employment opportunities for young people in East Ayrshire, and otherwise note the content of the report. I'll now take members through the report. Paragraphs 3 and 4, Cabinet will note that the authority was allocated a notional £1.1 million for financial year 21-22. The allocation was confirmed at the end of June 2021 and is to be spent by the end of March 2022. Recognising that we have a limited period to maximise the additional funding, much of the emphasis on what we're identifying as phase 2 of the Young Person Guarantee is on partnership delivery, although some additionality in staffing has also been requested to ensure we have the capacity to support increased numbers of young people. In paragraph 6, we describe arrangements for the payment of training allowances to support those young people furthest from the labour market who are engaging with our work coaches and building skills for work. These young people will be paid weekly in arrears, and allowances will be based on attendance and sustaining the training provision. We'd expect these placements to run no longer than 12 weeks before young people progress into national training programmes, further learning, apprenticeships or employment. In paragraph 7, we're seeking approval to support young people on Kickstart placements with the introduction of a Kickstart Plus scheme, where employers can access salary support through YPG to extend the employment of young people with the aim of supporting the provision of permanent and sustainable jobs. Paragraphs 8 and 9 recognise that free travel will be available to every young person up to 22 years from January. We'd want to use YPG funding to ensure that this is also available to 23 and 24-year-olds if travel is a barrier to work placements, training provision or employment. There is also an emphasis on the expansion of foundation apprenticeships in schools and the allocation of grant funding to support delivery for this session and in preparation for next session. From paragraph 10, the paper describes the establishment of a bank register of suitably experienced work coaches and employability practitioners to ensure we have the capacity to work with community groups and third sector partners to support young people outside of our larger towns, facilitating training in our smaller communities and more rural areas. Apologies to members, there's a typo in paragraph 11. It should read March 2022, not March 2002. Apologies for that. Effectively, over the next 6 months, we're looking at the 2 phases of the programme running concurrently. And in paragraphs 11 and 12, to support the expected expansion and delivery, we are seeking approval of 3 new temporary posts to join the existing team. These posts will run until March 22 and consist of an additional work coach, a job brokerage officer and an administration assistant. The establishment of a trusted partner framework in paragraph 13 is aimed at smaller targeted projects where local groups and third sector organisations can bid for funding up to a maximum of £25,000 to support young people in their own communities and help them build skills for life and work. For larger scale projects, we're looking to procure at least 4 sector skills academy projects described in paragraph 14, which will be tendered through Public Contracts Scotland. Bidders will be expected to identify a sector and how they will support young people with the skills to take up employment opportunities within it. They will also be expected to source opportunities into employment within that sector and then access salary support from YPG to move young people into jobs. Paragraphs 16 and to 19 refer to the introduction of an employer apprenticeship grant scheme, where £5,000 will be available to any employer as long as they are not drawing down any other current incentive to take on new apprentices. This is not necessarily a salary incentive and can be utilised in the way the employer deems best. And finally, in Chapter 21, the proposed spend is detailed and takes into account the marketing and promotion of the offer to young people and employers, while also recognising that these proposals could be impacted by a change in the COVID situation and the effect of other short-term funded programmes such as the yet-to-be-announced Community Renewal Fund. Paragraph 21 also refers to the project board itself taking an active role in the delivery of the programme, and we're seeking to give the board the designated authority to determine a response to any variance in the planned programme due to unforeseen circumstances that may arise between now and March 2022. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Excellent report. You know, it's just really given some hope and reassurance to our young people, and many of them with, you know, with challenging circumstances to deal with. And we had a very successful visit last week to the hub at SL33, which are helping many of these young people onto better paths and better outcomes and jobs and security for the future. It was really, really good to see. A couple of Claire Leach.
That's great, thanks, Chair. Ian, listen, just to say that's an absolutely brilliant paper. I read it with great interest. Especially delighted to see things such as the barriers, engagement such as locality and travelling, are they going to negatively affect our young people? Also really happy to see things like, you know, the receipt of grants to employers, you're taking into account things like zero-hour contracts will not be eligible. Things that's really going to thrust our young folk forward, getting into the world of work. So just to say again, thanks to you, your team, for the excellent work. And I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'll definitely need to visit you at your hubs, because that sounds excellent.
Thanks. I think that should be an open visit to any anybody in the cabinet wants to go and see it. Yeah, Claire, I think that can be accommodated. Dave, you want to respond?
Thanks, Chair. Just to take a couple of wee comments. It was just to thank Ian and Sharon for pulling this together for Linda and I. It was a great report, and it makes a lot of progress. I think one of the things I was going to just add, that we just a plea every time that we're meeting, you know, UK government or Scottish government, we're making this point about the funding situation and the deadlines with funding. We've got a very short period of time here to deliver these projects, and I think it's crucial that there's a level of flexibility built into this, because if we want to have the ambition to achieve all these aspirations we've set out, we need to be able to make sure we're working with businesses to deliver those. And with COVID, the pandemic still going on, with some businesses are still reluctant. So we keep working with the businesses, but we just want a bit of reassurance from both the governments, and if we're successful with the community renewal bid, which will then put another layer of, pressures on the team to deliver. We just need to make sure we get a level of flexibility around the funding stream, so it's not just, we don't have all this suggestion of money coming our way and then we have to give it back. We really don't want that. Thanks, Chair.
Fiona?
Right, thanks, Dougie. Thanks, Ian, for this excellent and ambitious report. It's really good. Delighted about the 40 supported apprenticeships, and also the fact we're able through funding to expand the foundation apprenticeships in schools. I think that's really good. Like Councillor Leach, I think the ability to assist young people in outlying communities is especially welcome and very important. The Scottish Government's Young Persons Guarantee is a meaningful vehicle to improve life chances and provide a skilled workforce for the future. This is aspirational for the young people of East Ayrshire, and can only stand us in good stead for the future. So thanks very much, Ian.
Thanks, Fiona. Tom?
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. I really welcome this paper. I mean, young people are our future, and every effort that we can make to get take to get these young people into meaningful employment is absolutely essential. We must do everything we possibly can, because one of the ways out of poverty is to get people working in properly paid jobs so that they can live at a reasonable standard of life. Just that one question in relation to transport, it does mention that free bus passes, but there'll be some areas where public transport just won't work for the young people to get them to where they need to be at the time they need to be. Can we put any support in to help in that situation?
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I think the essence, Councillor Cook, here is flexibility. I think we'd look at individual cases, and if there was a particular barrier, we'd absolutely try and make every effort to mitigate it. So it would be that engagement with work coaches to get the knowledge and the understanding of what the barrier is, and to put every effort in to mitigate it. So flexibility is the key here.
Thanks. Okay.
No, thanks. Pleased to hear that.
Okay, Tom. Yeah. John.
Right. Thanks, Chair. Again, I welcome the papers. I think it's very good, and I appreciate the time with Ian on the phone. He's went through the paper. But just one of my concerns is making sure that the money has gone into the apprenticeships, and a couple of figures there. For example, in paragraph 17, support recruitment of new apprentices with a contribution of £5,000 for each eligible apprenticeship. So when we're handing out that £5,000, seems a nice big round figure. What do we get for that £5,000? And I appreciate the comments of Ian about we need to support these young folk in their apprenticeships or their training. We can't just put them in there and then just leave them to go on with it. We've got to support them. But what do we get for that £5,000? Thank you.
Ian, can you answer that?
Yeah, again for you, Chair. I think what we get, Councillor McGee, is we need the commitment from the employer that the apprenticeship is going to be sustained. I think we've seen that when the apprenticeship employer grant was implemented by SDS just between December and March of this year, last year and this year, it was extremely successful in kind of encouraging employers who would not normally take on apprentices to take on apprentices. And that's the essence here. We're looking for additionality. We're looking for those employers who haven't had a history of taking on apprentices, that this might be the incentive for them to make that commitment. But part of the conditions of the grant would be that the apprenticeship has to be sustained. It has to be for the duration of the apprenticeship. It's not just taking on a young person, and then the young person would have to be there to complete their apprenticeship. So as I say, the main thing is a commitment to employers who haven't previously taken on apprentices.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, anyone else? No. Okay. I think that's it. Can we go to recommendations? Page 20. Can we agree? Thumbs up, whatever. Nods. That's fine. I thought that was the last of the items that was on. I missed that, so they're way away anyway. Okay, no mistake. And the final items, the East Ayrshire Community Learning Development Framework. Suzanne.
Thanks, Chair. I've been asked just to bring a presentation to Cabinet this morning just to take people through this report. So I'm just going to share my screen if you give me 2 minutes. Hopefully everybody can see that. Technology is wonderful. It was sharing, but it's not coming up. Technical expert here to help. Just while that presentation is coming up, just to let people know that the purpose of this report is really to bring the East Ayrshire Community Learning Development Framework for the next 3 years in front of Cabinet for approval. The purpose of it is prepared in response to the requirements for Community Learning Development Scotland's regulations that was prepared back in 2013. So really the purpose of bringing the report to Cabinet this morning is to get Cabinet to approve the Community Learning Development Framework for 2021 to 2024. That's set out in Appendix 1 of your report, and otherwise note the contents of the report. Just to give you some background while the presentation's still being loaded for me here, just to take you to paragraphs 3 to 5 of the report, a bit of background for Cabinet this morning. Our first Community Learning Development Framework was approved back in August 2015 for the period of 2015 to 2018, and then a further framework was brought and approved by Cabinet in September 2018, which covered the 2018 to 2021 period. These, as I said earlier, are prepared in response to the requirements for Community Learning Development Scotland regulations that was produced back in 2013, and it does place a duty on every authority to produce and coordinate and publish a CLD plan and framework for that authority area. So we have done that from September 2013 and produced every 3 years thereafter. In terms of how that plan's produced, that is up to each individual authority to determine that, and it was decided by East Ayrshire back in 2015 that would be developed as part, and every 3 years from thereafter, as part of our community planning review cycle. So taking you to paragraph 68 of the report, just in terms of further background, community learning development activity does have an extensive reach right across East Ayrshire and really does sit at the heart of transforming our relationship with communities. So the first and second CLD frameworks that were produced previously have both been very well received across our communities and are always produced in respect of that wider partnership and collaborative approach with our community learning development partners across East Ayrshire. They do recognise that extensive role that we do play in our communities and supporting our communities to develop, both in terms of how they operate within their area. So the new framework is not intended to detail all the work of these delivery of community development in East Ayrshire, but it is to outline and reference the response of the local authority, our community and our partners in terms of our work. So some of the particular work has been around engaging by Vibrant Communities, my own service, but most importantly with our partners in the community themselves in supporting and developing our children, our young people and our adults in our communities to develop. So I had hoped through the presentation, which doesn't seem to be working, so I'm just going to continue, was just to highlight some of the examples of the key achievements, given the bulk of the content of the review and the framework as sits in the appendix as part of the report. I had hoped to take you through some of that and bring out some of those key highlights within the presentation, but we will circulate that following Cabinet because it doesn't seem technology isn't working for us this morning. But Vibrant Communities and our CLD partners have been involved in that COVID response throughout a significant life of the plan. So it was just some of the points you'll see in the framework itself in the appendix does show the depth of response that our communities and partners have played during the journey throughout COVID, which is actually, as much as it's been an extremely challenging time for our communities, it has brought our communities and partners together in our response, and if it wasn't actually for our communities as a council, we would never been able to deliver and do what we've done in supporting our communities at a really challenging time. So just moving on, just to kind of bring to a close, so our CLD partners do continue to engage right across our communities, and on the back of the most recent CLD plan and moving forward into the developing of this framework, we have developed a communities partnership which will meet on a continuous basis from now on, both in terms of the monitoring of the plan, but also just in terms of how we plan together and avoid that duplication going forward. So the presentation is now working. I've skipped through, but we will circulate it. I'm not going to take you through it, but just to finish off, the next steps, obviously once this is approved today, we will be submitting the framework to Education Scotland. Graphics will be added as a very plain wordy document in your Cabinet report at the moment, but graphics will be added to it and it will be styled up. And in terms of it will be uploaded onto the community planning web pages. The communities partnership, as I said, will deliver on the framework, they'll monitor and they will evaluate that in addition to planning together. So apologies that the presentation didn't work on time, but we will circulate that following Cabinet, and that concludes the report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Suzanne. You've probably spent quite a bit of time, but you've been, I think you've had your problems. You've been well assaulted with the technology this morning, but thanks for your forbearance there. Members, any comments or questions? Can I just ask one, just because it was just been in the, I don't know if you can answer it or not, but just to kind of have a wee bit, in terms of placemaking and community-led action plans, there's been an issue, for me, we've got some really good examples and folk are copying the length and breadth of the country, and pleased to see South Ayrshire almost exact replica of what we're doing in vibrant communities, but I think they called it something different. That was launched last week. But one of the issues for me is, as a local member for Kilmarnock, is some of the issues that we've had trying to, being able to do community-led action plans and addressing, the communities. And it's great to do that, New Cumnock, or whether it's Fenwick or Darvel, but we've had a real issue, and we've got a group in the town centre doing their thing, and we've got community councils and organisations, and I was up at North West Kilmarnock on Monday with their ideas, and it just, there seems to be, how do we make sure we're getting it right for Kilmarnock, our principal town? It seems to be an issue.
Yep, just to come back in, Chair. So yeah, recognising in Kilmarnock it's a bit different from our more rural communities in terms of the development and publication of their community-led action plans. We do have the Celebrate Kilmarnock plan as the dominant plan for the Kilmarnock area that the surrounding communities can feed into. However, this is a priority for our communities team within Vibrant Communities to support any of our smaller communities in the Kilmarnock area that are looking to develop their plan to do so. Obviously, they do feed in through our LDP2 work, through our placemaking place plans as well. And I can tell you that probably the newest community that's just coming online, starting the process of developing their local community-led action plan is New Farm Loch, who's been a community for some time, has discussed that, but feel now they're at the right stage to take that forward. So it's absolutely looking at the other mechanisms where there isn't a community-led action plan in play led by the community for the community. It's looking at the other mechanisms such as community councils and other community and third sector organisations to ensure their voice is heard going forward and feeding in through our community planning partnership arrangements.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. Okay, any others? Okay, can we go to recommendations? Just to reiterate, the presentation will be circulated and members will get a copy of that. And just maybe go to recommendations and can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thumbs up there, so that's fine. So I think that's draws us to conclusion. Can I thank everybody for their attendance? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Bye.
Bye. Bye.